Back. You need to put the headset on. Exactly. Then you can hear me. So how are you? Are you good? Good? Woo! Good. Fantastic. So our next keynote speaker is Jack Allocca, neuroscientist and CEO of Somnivore, where he's at the forefront of AI-driven neuroscience research. Today, he will be sharing insights on how psychedelic states can impact our health and well-being, drawing from his latest groundbreaking research. So please give Jack a warm welcome here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And this is definitely a new format. Don't have to scream as much, and can be blasted straight into your skull. Okay, so we're talking about psychedelics today. I would like to survey quite rapidly in terms of like how much I should spend on the background. How many of you have taken psychedelics? Okay, I'm kind of impressed. How many of you are like avid psychedelic users? Like, love it, like a lot. Like, okay, a bit more. All right, that's reassuring. Anyway, these are my affiliations. I'm faculty in Melbourne University in the Department of Pharmacology and Therapeutics, and as well as neuroscience. And I'm the CEO of Somnivore, which is a company I built out of a piece of tech I invented during my PhD, based on machine learning that data mines neuroscience studies. It's used by universities, neuroscience labs, and pharmaceutical companies to augment their consciousness research, sleep studies, psychedelic pharmacology, ecophysiology, all that stuff. And I also provide psychedelic advisory and consulting for companies and also entrepreneurs that try to augment their personal and business life using altered states. So these are all the verticals of my research career. Coming from psychedelic science, I work a lot on sleep medicine as well. Peak experience, like I have research going on with free diving, and ecophysiology, so consciousness in wild animals. So experiments in Alaska, where we put chips in the brain of bears that are hibernating. We're trying to work out whether hibernation is sleep or an altered state of consciousness. We've got geese flying in the Netherlands, again with chips in their brain. They don't feel it, so it should be fine. Pigeons and obscure Australian wild animals, as well as artificial intelligence. So I'm trying to really cover as much as possible of that field. These are some of my collaborations for psychedelic pharmacology: psilocybin at Melbourne University, DMT and 5-MeO-DMT in London. With Maastricht, we're working heavily on 5-MeO-DMT. In the Czech Republic, psilocybin and new psychedelics. This is work done on animals, novel cannabinoids in Sydney. And I actually also work with Lundbeck, which is your local pharmaceutical company. I guess the biggest in Denmark, I guess. And then there's me. I'm here also because I've turned myself over the last 15 years into an experiential kind of N of one laboratory. I've exposed myself to almost any altered state I could get my hands on, over 100 different psychedelics and neurotropes of sorts, from dissociatives, deliriants, stimulants, sedatives, solvents, and research chemicals. I traveled most of my life in traditional and tribal context to try to see how people that live in these traditional ways alter their mind, whether those are psychoactive flowers or strange roots or seeds, and also extreme meditation, things that have nothing to do with drugs as well. So I do these very long meditation retreats, like weeks long by myself, or silent retreats, extreme sports, sensory deprivation, breathwork, tantra, extreme fasts. Basically, I try to tackle the field of altered states from as many angles as I can. So to understand what an altered state of consciousness is, we try to basically understand first what reality may or may not be. So many scientists, including myself, think that reality is, at least from a certain angle, a functional hallucination built by the brain to make sure that survival and reproduction are maximized. By drawing in all of the sensory perceptions from seeing, hearing, touching, licking, sniffing, and all of that, we can build a certain simulation of what may be out there. But in many ways, we know that that really isn't base reality. because eyes can only really perceive less than 1% of the whole field of all the colors that are available. Hearing only really captures a tiny bit. We've got no idea what radio waves sound like, gamma rays, like infrared, ultraviolet. That's most of the world, and we can't see that. So we're building all of this that we think is real out of less than 1% of the information available. So clearly that is not really all that there is. So that really begs the question of like, what is then the rest of reality, and why cannot we perceive it? And it seems that evolution really selected out this version of reality because that maximized our survival. I believe that at some point lots of people would have woken up or been birthed just tripping balls all the time on an LSD kind of experience, because the machinery is all there. But those people all died and exited the gene pool. But nonetheless, it is possible to do that, and we believe that there are actual benefits in tapping into those states. Anyway, we are organic pattern prediction and meaning-making machines to maximize evolutionary strategies. And ordinary waking consciousness is really governed a lot by this neural network of nuclei that forms a structure called default mode network, which really governs autobiographical thinking, belief systems, morality. Like when we are born, there's almost none of that. The baby doesn't really know that it's even a baby, or that it's a human, or there's like a past and a present. It's just there, completely blank. And you can see that it's not really doing much. At that point, through like punishment, pain, success, taste, light, and all of that, eventually coping mechanisms and the prediction models form into the default mode network. And in this way, then the baby turns into an actual adult human being, and he can make decisions, and he can actually see the world in a way that it's more similar to what we perceive now. So what are altered states of consciousness then? Altered states of consciousness are a way to tap away from that specific and relatively rigid way of seeing reality. And it's usually experienced exclusively during sleep. During sleep, the default mode network is knocked down in specific hubs, and you are basically experiencing the endogenous psychedelic state. Dreams are incredibly weird and unpredictable. You see all these kind of strange things, and they're all seemingly random and high definition, like photorealistic, and that's basically a way to rearrange and reconfigure information in a way that is not bound to the laws of physics, which can be a little bit too rigid, and to reprogram and reprocess things like emotional information, especially for things like traumas and damage. Like, let's say you're grieving, a loved one died. You can't really see that person. He or she's dead, gone. Right? So you keep ruminating on this, and it's not going away. And it's not going away because clearly that problem is not resolvable. When you're dreaming, when you are in sleep, you can actually simulate that person out of thin air and have that one last conversation that you really needed to have. Then you wake up in the morning and mysteriously you feel better. You don't even remember why, but parts of your systems manage to get closure in terms of that. And this is just an example out of millions of things that happen in sleep in terms of housekeeping, cleaning up, getting over problems and whatnot. This is in sleep. In wake, that capacity also exists, and it can be elicited by extremely strong sensory input, which usually means you're about to die. Too hot, too cold, immense pain, or immense pleasure are all things that are there to reconfigure your ego, your identity, your coping mechanisms, and ultimately your identity. Like on the bad side of things, you're freezing to death in a frozen lake. Clearly, you shouldn't have been there in the first place. You messed up. All of the coping mechanisms and prediction models that make you who you are failed. So they need to be suspended. And in the process of suspending them, you experience hallucinations because all of the different parts of the brain communicate in a way that they usually don't. And at that point, you're basically tripping. And like you're in a war zone and there's bullets in your chest, not in your heart, but somewhere there, and you're still running because you know you're about to die. You don't have time to feel pain, and at that point you're also experiencing an altered state. Or a predator is eating you alive and you're going to this paralyzed kind of, like completely suspended state, like plain dead. That's another altered state, which has saved some animals and humans in the past. That's an altered state. So all of these altered states are there to reprogram the ego because you made incredible mistakes or because you need to change as a person. Like your wife just gave birth, or you as a woman gave birth. Clearly your identity is going to change quite drastically. And in the process of that, people experience these absolutely insane feelings of like shifts, and because clearly they are changing from being just a dude or a woman into a parent. That's a big reorganization. It needs to happen that way. Anyway, why should we care now about altered states all of a sudden, right? There's a number of reasons. Because we're clearly losing our health. All of these mysterious conditions are skyrocketing, from diabetes to autism, ADHD, especially ADHD. Why, right? And mood disorders, sleep is going down the drain. And like, why? Why should we go undergoing such a corruption of our basic physical and mental health while we are so abundant of all these things? That begs a question. We're clearly not operating like we are supposed to. We're losing our biosphere. That begs no debate. We've lost 95% of our biosphere. There's basically no wild animals anymore. There's just pigs, cows, and sheep, and a few insects. But even the insects have shrunken. It's kind of a disaster. And then we're losing our humanity. What is humanity in the first place? Every few decades we kind of change our mind. Now it seems, in the last 70 years, 60, 70 years, more or less, now it's all about profit maximization. Make more money, which means that then we build technology to do that, industrial output, more and more and more. But as societies around the world do this a lot, then humans need to compete against one another to maximize profit, which then means competing against the machines that we engineered to maximize profits, which then means that we're basically competing against machines. And then we have to change our actual underpinning nature to be able to compete against the machine. So we're ultimately becoming more like robots because they're so good at doing everything. And that is tricky. That is cumbersome. So this is basically a quick plot of all of the technologies that have been building themselves up since the birth of life billions of years ago. You see, these things are accelerating in a way that is insane, escaping any kind of Moore's law or anything like technological. There's like life, eukaryotic cells, reptiles, mammals, that's the time scale, and it's shrunk into a way that is now a cliff. Right? Personal computer is there. I still remember when I was a kid, there was no fucking smartphones, and now you can generate videos like with like an import. Like, it's crazy. Like, so things are changing in a way that is completely decoupled with how biological entities evolve at the cellular level. This clearly is going to have repercussions. These are some of the expectations of intellectuals a few years ago, like John Maynard Keynes. Notoriously was like, be naive. It's like, for the first time since his creation, man will be faced with his permanent problem. How to use his freedom from pressing economic cares. How to occupy the leisure, which science and compounding interests will have won for him, to live wisely, agreeably, and well. So basically, the robots will do everything. We can just focus on painting, walking through fields, in the sun, no cares in the world, the occasional orgy, drugs, and just to live well. And this was the idea, right? Has this played out like this? I'm not sure. This is the kind of things that we hear now. Rather than being bored to death, our actual challenge is to avoid anxiety attacks, psychotic breakdowns, heart attacks, and strokes resulting from being accelerated to death. How did we come here, right? We were supposed to be living in a techno-utopia. And yeah, this is one of the pieces of the puzzles. It's the Jevons paradox, where basically it seems that when things get more efficient and cheaper, people don't chill. They don't save things. This is an example with fuel, petrol. As petrol price collapses because it gets easier to get it out of the ground and refine it, people thought, they're going to save money, invest money on food, on education, on the arts, all that stuff that John Maynard Keynes thought about. That's not true. The cheaper petrol becomes, the more people spend on fuel itself because they want to drive more. They want to drive more. So it's cheaper to drive. I'm just going to go on more holidays. I'm going to work more. And why? Because humans are inherently hyper-competitive. If you don't go on that extra holiday, your friend is going to go on that extra holiday, and you're going to feel like FOMO. He's going to, why am I not having as much fun as my friend? And this is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that person is going to work harder than me, and I'm going to lose my job. So I have to actually do more. So depending on how you look at it, people are just going to consume more and more and more until oblivion. Throw into the mix hedonic adaptation, which is a core feature of humans, and then we are kind of fucked, right? We need to kind of put a specific brake so that we don't just keep accelerating, because technology enables us to accelerate. Like, what will happen once we have nuclear fusion and we can just have electricity on demand? Like, what will happen to the Amazon? What will happen to everything else once electricity becomes so easy to obtain? This is why I'm one of the few that actually says, I'm not sure I want nuclear fusion. Right? So this is another thing. You can look it up. It's awesome, right? The Middle Ages were the worst time in history, according to most intellectuals. Yet it seems that a medieval fucking peasant had more vacation time than you. And when I mean you, I mean literally most of you. They had like 4 to 5 months off a year, right? It was too cold. They were going to crop. There was not the technology to do that. So they were just chilling. They were praying. They were like not doing it. They couldn't even fight. There was like this untold cavalier rule. The wars were not to be fought in winter either. So they were just like, just eating whatever they were accumulating in summer, and a lot of religious stuff. They were not working. Now you're lucky if you get 3 or 4 weeks off. In Europe, in America, it's like 1 or 2 weeks. It's mind-blowing, right? A medieval peasant got more not free time, vacation time than you. So how did we get there? So this is how it's basically how it's boiling down to now. We're kind of forking into 2 options. There's on the left, more technology to get us even more removed from nature and everything else, quite expensive as well, and debatably not even as attractive. And then there's the right, which I've made wide use of, and it's actually improved my quality of life. Then psychedelics. I'm not going to bore you with this. You can just Google it. These substances that make you have radically distorted and crazy experiences. And they're essentially modulators of consciousness. They press receptors in your brains like notes on a keyboard, creating all of these bizarre reality symphonies where things are distorted, crazy colors, weird body sensations, different idea generation and pattern recognition. They're really weird, and they are absolutely incredible. This is the kind of things that we see in neuroimaging. Each one of these dots is a brain area, more or less active according to the size of the blob, and then there's the connections between them. When you're born, you're mostly like this. When you're like a baby, there's no default mode network really active, so it's just like blah, 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 there's all this stuff happening. Then you learn how to be a human, and it gets consolidated, you become more like that. But that means that also you become more rigid in the way you think, a little bit more predictable. And you saw what happens with the chart, with the technology going. You can't be too predictable, otherwise you'll be disrupted by whatever other technology that comes about, or anyone else that uses that technology. So we start to see more and more benefit in starting to tap every so often into that state. We can't do that the natural way, because by the age of 15 or 16, a lot of these things are cut off through synaptic pruning, it's called, and then you're like an adult. But psychedelics actually temporarily bring you into that state. And at the level of neural networks, in theory of machine learning with artificial intelligence, internally, the LLMs or classifiers actually work a lot more like this. They keep switching according to what kind of pattern they want. How are you going to compete with something like this? So, food for thought. How to trip. You know, how would you actually do these things? This is some due diligence. Because psychedelics are also very dangerous, right? Whatever works is also, it's potential for damage. The dose really decides the intensity. It's like the slope. I like to make analogies with extreme sports because I love them. It's like snowboarding. The more drug, the more incline, right? Intention, where are you going to go? Into the field, or you're having like some kind of challenge, a competition, or you're just going down a cliff or whatever. Intention, areas of potential growth, set, everything that's inside. Are you going to snowboard or take psychedelics after you just split up from your partner of 30 years and you have to go through like a divorce, or after you lost a loved one again, or after, like, there's a war happening, your experience snowboarding or taking drugs is going to really be altered by that. Setting, everything that's outside. You're going to snowboard or take drugs when the sun is out or when it's a blizzard is out. Or you have a broken leg or not, like all of these things. Sitter is your co-pilot, like a coach or anyone that knows what's going on. They can kind of guide the experience a little bit more. Then integration, how to improve the actual installing of the insights that you got. Disclaimer, everything that works can damage you. There's different doses, there's micro dosing, mini dose, medium dose, heroic doses. They usually ask me to talk about microdosing because it's all the rage now, but it's pretty boring. So I'm going straight into the heroic dose, which is like what you usually don't hear about, which is what happens when you take mountains of psychedelics. And what are the opportunities there, or many of the reasons why you should not go anywhere near it. But I'm a bit biased. There's a lot of psychedelics of all sorts. These are the natural ones. Then there's the synthetic ones. I've tried most of them. They're like very weird. And then now we're talking mostly about 5-MeO-DMT and DMT, which I've worked heavily on this year. DMT is the active constituent in ayahuasca, this Amazonian brew that is all the rage now. And when you smoke it or inject it, you go into this world of alternative realities with like goblins, insectoids, robots, and they're there. They're not like clouds. Oh, I think I see a hippo in the cloud. No, you literally see a hippo being ridden by Mickey Mouse, showing you a book full of things, and it's literally what you're seeing. It's insane. And there's entire lectures just on what may be happening to DMT. This is not the time and the place. And then there is 5-MeO-DMT, which is basically DMT with a 5-methoxy group attached to the 5th carbon of the indole ring. That has basically the opposite effect, where you see nothing. It's like feeling like being in a cannon, and you're just being propelled, and you are like the projectile, just going at the speed of sound or plus, and you're just like, being torn into everything and anything, injected with pure entropy into a whiteness of fractalized everything. It's not subtle. But yeah, anyway, so what are extreme psychedelic states then? It's mostly two things, very long and very strong, or both combined. Why would anyone do something like this? Because heroic doses can fundamentally change the ontological shock that can suspend all of your prior beliefs. Social conditioning, maladaptive loops, all of your coping mechanisms, all your bullshit stories, mommy or daddy issues, they all get annihilated. And you kind of revert back to a rebooted version of you, which could be for the better and the worse, according to the kind of support you have available, the kind of training you have available, the kind of physical health you have available. But it's possible. Some people get stuck in certain thought loops lifelong. And sometimes you just need to kind of have your bullshit dropped and reconfigured. That is one way to do that. And the extended release can help the habituation. That's more for the strength. For the extended stay, they help you learn how to be a psychonaut, basically, how to learn how to thrive and control the psychedelic state. Because one of the problems with 5-MeO-DMT and DMT is that they're really fast, 5-10 minutes, and then you're out. And for those 5 to 10 minutes, you're usually kind of paralyzed and blind in this alien world. When you come out, most people are like, I don't know what happened. You know, just like, whoa, that was cool, but like, that's usually not very conducive to growth. For some people, magic happens and they're just better people, but they don't really know what happened. They just like woke up from a near-death experience and they're just like, whoa, that was cool. Yeah, for the next 5 years, maybe I'll do something else. And so that's fine. But in the lab, we were like, well, what if we extend this? Maybe there's some value there, because when you skydive, how many of you are skydived? Okay, a few. How many of you have their own parachute and they're licensed skydivers? Oh, that's embarrassing. Not even one. That's crazy. What the fuck? But anyway, you know, you've done the skydive. When you come out, you're like, I don't know what's up, what's down, what's left, what's right. It's very confusing. But when you want to actually become certified, you keep jumping. And you're like a baby at the beginning, but then, you know, eventually you get it. And it's like, you get the balance, and then you can do things. So if you're 5 to 10 minutes in such a crazy state, you're not going to expect to really learn much. But if you're in there for like half an hour or an hour, eventually, even just for the sake of your own mental health, you're going to get it, right, or else. And that's basically one of the benefits. Peak experiences, another thing. Humans are heavily deficient on peak experiences. Even think about like 500 years ago. You know, a snow leopard came from anywhere while you're fetching water. Now you have to concuss it to death while it's eating one of your legs, and somehow you survive it and bring the carcass home. Peak experience. One of your children, you know, managed to become a warrior and breached into the nearest village and came back with like spoils. Peak experience. You just won a war against people coming up to you with rocks and sticks. Yep. These are all peak experiences. What of that magnitude happens today? Nothing, really, unless you really get into MMA fighting or you do. But even that, it's within the bounds of a certain system, some rules. Like, it's not the same. Now we're basically jaded, bored, and you know, and everything is too easy. We can just Netflix our life away, bullshit jobs, and there's just no real, like, to spice it up a little bit, we do ice baths and saunas, right? Expecting, whoa, finally I feel a little bit alive. No shit, since this is literally the extent of the experience that you're gonna get. While before, you'd be swimming through an icy river just to, you know, choke a polar bear into submission because you're hungry. That's a very different experience. So we are totally deprived of these kind of things. So we're jaded, complacent, bored. Like, we know we should do all these things. Wake up in the morning at 5, stare into the sun, eat these things, not eat these things, and then meditate, stretch. But we don't want to fucking do that because it's boring. Why should we do that? We're just going to do bullshit jobs and then go to Netflix and get the fix and then do it over and over because I'm still getting fed and hydrated, and that's good enough according to my evolution. Why should I go anywhere else? So peak experiences induced by psychedelics really bring a new avenue into people, and it's maybe life is worth fighting for. Maybe there's some adventure out there, instead of just having to use digital dopamine for it. So DMTX, this is one experiment. I was one of the pioneers with the Imperial Group in 2021, where we did a DMT pump, which is basically intravenous DMT for half an hour. So there's 45 minutes of breakthrough, which is basically like having a DMT pipe. Who's tried here DMT? A few. It's like having a DMT pipe taped to your mouth with no possibility of escape for like half an hour. It's a lot. But anyway, I don't know if you can. This is a video on my Instagram, if you can see the procedure. And really learned a lot during that. Did it 5 times. We have a lot of data. And yeah, in terms of like personal, spiritual, and professional growth, this is the kind of things that enabled me to be both a biologist, an engineer, travel, and they're like very diverse things instead of being bottled up into a very specific identity, which is what humans usually do. Anyway, then there's 5-MeO-DMT. Intramuscular and intranasal. 5-MeO-DMT. Who's tried here 5-MeO-DMT? Really a few, okay. This is one of the most insane ones. This is really crazy. A frog makes it, like a huge toad, in its venom, on its skin. You squeeze the glands, then you let it dry, and then you smoke the flakes of the venom in a crack pipe, and you're literally on the ground seizing for like 10 minutes. In this way, you can do it for 1.5 hours. It's not for beginners, but the effects that we've seen are incredible. This is intranasal, which is even 12 milligrams is a lot. It was at Imperial. This was before. This was during. Now you can forget about this and move on. 5-MeO-DMT, it's very strong, and it's been observed to relieve PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance use, addictions, OCD, all of these things. And for 10% of the people, shit gets massively worse. So it needs to be, but 90% is still a massive number. Even just in terms of peak experiences, where people are completely jaded by capitalistic, boring society, they're just like, whoa, finally I can do weird things. Because otherwise, everything that you see in films now, which is the peak experiences of people, in real life, it's all illegal, that stuff. How are you going to really slay dragons and do stuff? Even the way they talk on the phone, when they just hang up and they don't say bye and shit. Not even that happens in real life. So anyway, you got, like, these are some of the benefits again from all of these surveys in terms of stress, anxiety, mindfulness. The results are stark. And yeah, mindfulness questionnaires, and then we've got life satisfaction, keeps improving. And then especially on extended state, we have all of these somatic releases. So people go into these stereotyped kind of movements, very strong. Even I myself was for 2 weeks kind of sore, every muscle was pulled. But then a lot of like tension in my back or things that were unrelieved for years, or like deep tissue massage, acupuncture, we just relaxed and it was cool. So it seems that there's like a system in the body where trauma is stored. There's a few books on this. And extreme psychedelic states can really go there and initiate cathartic release. You can Google this. It's when like Kundalini yoga, like breath work and near-death experiences cause like the body to do these weird things. And wild creatures in Africa do this all the time after escaping predators. So it seems that there is an algorithm inside that is really there to resolve unresolved problems. And with extended heroic doses of 5-MeO-DMT, we've seen at a 100% release, which is a massive deal. Anyway, this is some of the rest of the team across Czech Republic, Netherlands, and Australia. And summary, extended release, heroic dose, or both can provide the healing from all patterns, reconfiguration of self, peak experiences maximization, a personal and professional competitive advantage, but they should be treated with extreme care, like extreme sports or surgery. They're really not like to be messed with. As Harari said, in order to keep up with the world in 2050, you will need not to merely invent new ideas and products, but above all to reinvent yourself and again and again. And this is one way that has enabled me to do that. And as I say, you're not paid according to how hard you work, but you're paid according to how hard it is to replace you. So you better get creative. This is some of the stuff where it features documentaries, some books, the second chapter of this book if you're curious. And I mostly work with entrepreneurs and company founders, but I'm in the process of putting together a course as well. If you are interested in that, send me an email, follow me on Instagram, whatever. Cool. Thank you.
Woohoo! You just turned your back on me. You saw that? You just, oh my gosh, she's coming. She's coming. Yeah.
Only 2 minutes over time.
Okay, and unfortunately, no time for questions.
You can chase me down somewhere.
Super. Sounds good. Okay, we'll be back here at 4 with Caroline Fiebeck.